Good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. Welcome to this terrific teach-in on the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund, or GAP Fund. My name is Lisa Marshall. I'm the Director of Organizing and Advocacy with New Yorkers for Clean Power, and I'll be your host today. This is one of our teach-ins that we do throughout the year. You can find an archive of all our wonderful teach-ins on different clean energy topics on our website and on YouTube. So if you miss a teach-in and you want to find out what people said, feel free to check that out. We have a really terrific group presenting to you today about this important clean energy and energy affordability legislation that we're hoping to get passed in this year's budget. And I want to just get us started. First, can I find out if Legislator Kellis or Senator Gonzalez are with us yet today. If they aren't, we can go to the next speaker and we can interrupt when they get here. But if they are here, we'd love to have them kick us off. They are the prime sponsors of this legislation, and we're so happy to have them joining us today. While I wait and see.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, is that
Assemblymember Kellis.
Assemblymember Kellis? Can we spotlight Assemblymember Kellis? And I see that Senator Gonzalez has also joined us. So,
And I need to run because I'm in a public hearing, but I would happy to be here with you guys for a minute.
all right. Are you able to be on camera?
I am. I'm on camera.
Can we spotlight Assemblymember Kellis, please? And we'll turn it over to you to welcome all these wonderful advocates and clean energy enthusiasts who want to help us pass this great bill.
Fantastic. I am so glad you are all here. I apologize. I'm a little under the weather and literally in 3 meetings at the same time. I'm trying to save horseshoe crabs from being tortured in the other room. So I'm going to jump back in and do that in a moment. Trying to emotionally recenter myself from the testimonies that I just heard. I'm so glad you guys are here. Following yesterday, the meeting that we just had, which was the public hearing on environment. If you haven't seen it, particularly the exchange that I had with President Doreen Harris, please do watch it because it was a very exciting exchange that we had. The recognition that we absolutely do need to help low-income families in New York State be able to more effectively afford their homes by supporting them in creating the energy efficiencies that they need in their homes, so that again, it's more cost effective to live here in New York. She not only recognized the conversations we'd had specifically about this, but agreed that it was needed and that there was not enough money in the funds that we are doing so far. So I'm just going to explain really quickly what I mean by that. Right now, we have Empower Plus that specifically helps people who are income qualifying do electrification modifications and efficiency measures to their homes. However, if they need hazard mitigation or pre-electrification modifications to their home, like a new roof or addressing black mold, they are told they do not qualify for the program. Now, who are the people who are most likely of those who are income qualifying to have a home that needs these pre-electrification modifications? They are the lowest income households of the low and medium income households. So the people who are most in need are the ones who cannot access this program. That is an oversight, and we need to fix that oversight. And that is literally what the GAP Fund does. The GAP Fund says we've always done, we've had this oversight in this program from the very beginning. We need to make sure that we rectify this issue because these people are and households, low-income households, are not only not able to afford to live in that household. And we know that if we do these modifications, it will reduce their cost of living. We also know that these households contribute significantly to the greenhouse gases in the state. So we cannot reach our climate goals unless we help people who live in homes that are inefficient and dependent heavily on natural gas infrastructure transition off this infrastructure. This is foundational to reaching our CLCPA goals. It's simply as easy and direct as that. So I think there's a wonderful place for it. There in the governor's budget, there was $1 billion that was put as a proposal for a capital infusion to help us transition to meet our CLCPA goals, transition to a more electrified New York. That I think is the perfect place where we should put a request for the funding for the GAP fund. It's already in her budget. I just think that this needs to be earmarked for this purpose because we know that it will directly help us reach our goals collectively, and it will address equity issues that we have in our state. So thank you so much to the organizers for doing this. It is so clear and straightforward. I'm so excited to be one of the two champions with my wonderful Senate colleague, Kristen Gonzalez. And I'm going to go back and continue to fight for ethical treatment of animals. So thank you all for being here. And I will follow up with people. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to my office. Thank you so much, Lisa, for leading this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kellis, Assemblymember Kellis. We're just so lucky to have Anna Kellis as a champion for all clean energy and environmental issues in the Assembly, and to be the lead sponsor of this bill. And we'd love to also hear a few words from Senator Gonzalez. Senator Gonzalez, if we
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I
nice.
am so excited to see the turnout right now. Looks like we have 85 people on this call, which is huge. So thank you to the organizers. Thank you to everyone for showing up and spending your time with us. I'm very excited for this presentation. So if it's the first time we're meeting, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I'm Kristen Gonzalez. I'm the state senator for District 59, covering Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. And my district's a waterfront district. It's also an environmental justice district. I host the city's power plant, but I also in Ravenswood, but also represent Greenpoint, which is the site of the largest underground oil spill in the entire country. And even more than that, we have so many homes in our district that are, aging housing, part of our aging housing stock that need to be retrofitted for renewables. So this bill was a natural fit and priority for a lot of my constituents. And I think I see even a couple of them on this call who are here.
Senator
Shout out to Kim.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you able to go on camera at all? It would
Oh,
be
sorry. I'm in between meetings, so I'm kind of rushing and I'm sure, but I also am on my phone, so I don't think it's gonna be the best. Like it's gonna freeze.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just take whatever we can get you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. We just got out of conference. I'm actually rushing to my next, I'm doing an immigration roundtable, so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I was just gonna second what Assemblymember Kella said. Yesterday we had our budget hearings, and I also asked during Harris, what's the progress been on retrofitting our aging housing stock? And a lot of these programs, I think, she said they've made good progress, but we're not there yet. And so it's remarkable to me that we would not have a fund already, like the GAP fund, to help any low income resident or anyone from a marginalized or environmental justice community who wants to retrofit and upgrade, but does not meet the prerequisites for the existing program. So this really was, this is a no-brainer. I think this is common sense. We should not be turning people away. And so I'm excited to have seen her receptiveness, to have heard that. She even mentioned they're going to move forward and start through a new portal, helping people figure out what funds they qualify for, because it's not just getting this bill passed and getting this funding. We want to make sure that while we're doing that, we're having conversations with NYSERDA to make sure that people know it exists, because if people don't know it exists, they're not going to use this funding. So I'm excited about the progress on both fronts, and I'm here, certainly to be a resource. So feel free to reach out to our office. Thank you to Assemblymember Kellis for the incredible work she's also been doing in the Assembly on this. We did pass this bill or a version of this through the Senate. So I, with, all of your support, I'm confident we can do that again and especially through this executive budget. So I'm going to end with that and turn it back to our presenters.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Senator Gonzalez, for all your work. And Senator Gonzalez sits on the Senate Energy Committee, where she is am I allowed to say you're a badass? Or she's a total badass. So we're so happy to have you in our corner and championing this bill. And we're looking forward to doing great things together. So thank you so much. So I want to go next to and introduce Avni Pravin, who is the Deputy Director at Alliance for Green Economy, or AGREE, who is going to walk us through actually what is in the GAP Fund legislation. And let's go to the next slide and welcome Avni.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And thank you all for being here today. I know you've already heard about why this bill is so important for people's health and safety and lives. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty around that. So as Dr. Nikellis mentioned and Senator Gonzalez mentioned, weatherization and electrification are really such integral parts of how we meet our climate goals. Buildings are our largest source of greenhouse gases, and it's also the places that we live and play and learn and go to work. So having healthy buildings is really important. And New York State actually does have some funding in order to make upgrades to homes. In 2024, there was around $317 million for a number of things, including whole home retrofits and weatherization retrofits. And this spans, single family, 1 to 4 family and multifamily buildings. Also covers heat pump installation upgrades and energy efficiency upgrades. So there is some money available for these improvements. And just to get into a couple of, the quality of life improvements that come with this, if you get a fossil fuel combustion cooking system out of your home, like a gas stove. Gas stoves are linked to the development of asthma in children. They leak even when they're not on. So replacing that with an electric stove can really improve your indoor air quality. Something else that we're seeing, unfortunately, with climate change is that our summers are getting hotter and hotter. And New York homes typically don't come with air conditioning already built in because we did not previously need that in this climate. And so replacing your gas furnace with a heat pump also gives you access to cooling that your home may never have had. And having access to cooling is such a major improvement for children, elderly folks, people with vulnerable health conditions, COPD, people with asthma, getting overheated. And we also know that people who die in heat waves are disproportionately people of color and low income. So there's a ton of climate and energy justice outcomes associated with being able to access cooling. And lastly, the thing that I'll say about energy efficiency improvements, it is the #1 tool in our toolkit for being able to reduce our energy consumption in our state and also do it cost effectively and do it in a way that benefits people and their wallets and their energy bills. But as we've heard, there are a number of barriers to accessing these programs. And so the gap is, last slide. So the gap is that many of the New York State residents that would benefit from these electrification and weatherization programs are the most unable to access them because their homes are in pre-existing poor conditions. And this is often because there are structural deficiencies or health and safety hazards that are so expensive to resolve. And we find that in low income households, but also moderate income households, these repairs are very costly and few homes have the upfront capital to be able to make these repairs. And I'll talk a little bit about what those repairs and barriers are. But what ends up happening is that if you go into a home and you see that there are toxic health hazards in the home. You're not going to want to insulate or put in new doors and windows that are going to seal someone up with those toxic hazards. So you need to remove those before you're able to actually make those insulation improvements, make those building envelope improvements. And those can be extremely costly. So if you're unable to afford that barrier mitigation on your own, you cannot move forward with those electrification and weatherization programs ultimately. And in essence, you are cut out of those programs that are so beneficial and a key part of our clean energy, a clean, just energy transition. Next slide, please. So this is exactly the problem that the GAP Fund seeks to address. We have heard from a number of program implementers and contractors, households who have worked with these electrification and weatherization programs and identified some of those most pernicious barriers that we need to fix before we're able to move forward. And so some of the top 3 things that people say that we've heard about, what we need to do differently. We need an easier application. And we need the GAP Fund to not be another big barrier for people to overcome in order to get access to these improvements. We want people to be able to get to that end step of energy efficiency retrofits and electrification retrofits. And so the GAP Fund is going to improve access to those things by removing these barriers that we just talked about. And then lastly, these retrofits that the GAP Fund will cover have massive implications for people's health in the home. If you're getting mold, lead, asbestos, pests, radon out of your home, you're going to be able to enjoy a better quality of life, potentially experience lessened respiratory disorder symptoms. And that is so, so important for housing justice and climate justice. Next slide, please. So what is the GAP Fund actually going to pay for? So the top problems identified by contractors and homeowners and program implementers in homes that prevent you from moving forward are health hazard remediation. We already talked a little bit about that, but then there's also structural repairs. So if your roof is leaky or old and needs to be replaced, and your foundation is cracking or sinking, you need to be able to fix those things before moving forward. Heat pumps and other electrical appliances often require some kind of new or more efficient or an electrical panel that can handle more voltage or require a different kind of wiring. And so households that weren't able to afford that on their own were not able to get electrical appliances. And so this is another thing that the GAP Fund wants to take care of, or that we want to take care of through the GAP Fund. The GAP Fund would also cover moisture control. So you could deal with the mold, but if you don't deal with the original problem, that's just going to come back again. And so actually getting to the root of the problem is important. And finally, one thing that we've seen is that if you're unable to cover the cost of getting rid of your fossil fuel appliance, these programs can cover the installation of the heat pump and the heat pump rebate itself. But you have to be able to dispose of your fossil fuel appliance, and that is an additional cost barrier. Next slide, please. So how does this work? The bill envisions that whoever implements this program is going to do it in consultation with the Division of Housing and Community Renewal. They already have a number of programs that help, especially multifamily buildings, and also in consultation with NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which also houses and implements a number of energy efficiency, weatherization, and electrification programs. And so it's really relying on state agencies with previous expertise and to just streamline the GAP Fund working in conjunction with other energy efficiency and electrification programs. So again, you're not having to bounce back and forth between a ton of different programs to get home improvements done. Next, the bill also includes tenant protections. This is an incredibly important part of the bill because as people, especially folks in housing justice work know, oftentimes landlords will use capital improvements as a way to displace or evict tenants and then turn that into like a luxury unit. So this bill places direct restrictions on rent increases and limits the increase of rent for to 3% for at least 5 years following project completion. And lastly, there is a stipulation about data reporting so that we can learn a lot from this initial implementation because we know that we're going to learn a lot about our housing stock as this program rolled out. So we want to know things like how many homes get funding and were people satisfied with the outcome of the project? Did people have any issues completing the project or being able to use the money so that we can continually improve the GAP fund and its implementation and hopefully continue funding it. Next slide. So there are limits set on building size, and these are based on rough estimates from contractors who have seen buildings and homes that need multiple fixes and have kind of determined, where those limits based on the number of units in a building, where those limits should be. The limits are also based on household income so that people who have the least upfront capital can receive the most help. And later in the bill, it also recommends that disadvantaged communities, that's a legal definition in New York State, but making sure that disadvantaged communities are prioritized for this funding. So this is here in case anyone wants to return to the slide, but I won't read through the wall of text and I'll just move on to my last slide. Oh, I think I'm done. I'll pass it back to Lisa.
Thanks so much, Avni. I wanted to let everybody know that if you have questions as we go through, there's a lot of information, and please feel free to type your questions into the chat and we will get to those at the end. And I also shared in the chat a one-page overview of the GAP Fund that was just completed this week. It has been reintroduced in the House and Senate and has new bill numbers now and new language. So you can see all that, and when you can download that and you can share it with other people that you want to educate about the GAP Fund, including your own legislator. So our next speaker I want to introduce is Matt Dennis of Halco Energy. I've worked closely with Matt for many years. They're one of the biggest contractors in the central New York and Finger Lakes area doing this type of energy work in homes. And they do a lot of work in low and moderate income homes that qualify for Empower Plus and other programs. And Matt, I think, is probably the #1 heat pump salesman in all of New York State and has just really a passion for climate solutions and for helping people to improve and upgrade their homes. And he has seen it all. So without further ado, I'd love to turn this over to Matt, who has actual photographs and stories to share with you from some of the many homes that he has worked in over these years. Matt, welcome and thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite. Certainly do appreciate it. Just quick, as Lisa said, Halco is one of the largest contractors, home performance contractors in New York State. And we're actually shifting more towards Halco Home Solutions to try to tackle all these other problems that houses have, as well as their energy concerns. We do cover quite a big area throughout central New York and the Finger Lakes, 26 counties, and we do everything. So pretty much if it's broke, we can fix it. But we run into all the time challenges, especially with Allight projects and Empower Plus projects, where fixes need to be done before we can even touch the insulation, before we can even look at heat pumps as an option. Just a lot of barriers that sort of stall projects. Interesting statistic, about 80% of all New Yorkers qualify for some level of the Empower Plus program. and which is pretty huge. I think that was a staggering number when I first saw it. But there's funding out there, and there's a lot of homes we fix every day. And we're very big on trying to help LMI communities and folks to make their lives a little bit easier. So I'm just going to kind of go through and show you some of the challenges we run into on a regular basis. This is just a quick list. I've got a slide for each one of these, but in no particular order because it's kind of hard to prioritize. So I'm just going to kind of take you through and sort of show you what we deal with every day. Go ahead. Next slide. Okay. The NYSERDA does a lot, and the Empower programs do a phenomenal job of really tackling a lot of things. And there's a lot of times where we'll run into an issue where it stalls a project, and we'll go to NYSERDA and say, hey, can we, we got to do something. We have to fix this thing before we can do all of these other things. And to their credit, and through their processes, we do get more out of it in a lot of cases, but a lot of times the answer is no, or the money's just not there. So we go to a variety of community programs and organizations like Sustainable Finger Lakes, like the Bishop Sheen, Catholic Charities, Home Headquarters, Pass Stone, and a bunch of others, where we basically say, hey, we have a project and we're stuck because we got a wet basement, and we're not going to go air sealing and tightening up a wet basement because we're just going to make everything worse. But NYSERDA doesn't have funding for that. How do we, can you help? And then we, come up with, some folks to help out, because, not everybody has the means to spend to fix a lot of these problems, which is typically why they don't get fixed. Next slide. This is a big one, vermiculite in an attic. If those of you don't know what vermiculite is, it's an innocuous mineral. It's actually harmless, but most vermiculite in the United States came from a mine in Montana that was discovered that had an asbestos vein running through it. So we have to treat vermiculite as if it is asbestos contaminated. In New York State, we cannot touch this stuff without a certified asbestos license. We do work with a couple of contractors that are licensed to deal with this, but the problem is if I go into a house and I see this in an attic, that's a stop right there. I can't touch that attic unless that vermiculite is gone, and so I can't go digging through it to air seal. I can't blow insulation over top, and we can't insulate an attic. We can't electrify a home. Next slide. Asbestos pipe wrap and duct wrap, friable. The word friable means it's loose enough to become airborne. And if we run into situations like this, not only is that a health and safety issue for the homeowner, I can't run a blower door safely to test the air leakage to prove that any measures we want to fix can be done. And if we find a lot of this asbestos wrap that's decayed and just fallen apart and it's just a mess, it's not safe for us to even be walking around kicking this stuff up because we're just making a mess of it. And it's, again, asbestos remediation is not an inexpensive endeavor. So again, there's one of the things we need to find to funding to sort of help with that. Next. Mold, not uncommon. Mold in an attic, mold in a basement, crawl space, what have you. We walk into homes all the time and we see this stuff. This is a major issue. There's a lot of things that can be done to fix this, but again, not everything comes with a cost, and it's just a lot of it's just not there. But if we find this is typically indicative of major moisture issues elsewhere in the house that we need to solve and seal up and figure out. Next. Wet basements. This is actually the basement of the case study that Lisa put together before we did any work. As you can see, major moisture issues, a lot of rotted stuff. I believe, when I was there and took these pictures, I was standing in 2 inches of water. But again, there's no way we would tighten up this house with a wet basement, because we would literally just cause a litany of mold problems. Next. Foundation structure repairs. This one's kind of extreme, but this is just to emphasize the problem. I mean, that wall is caving in. We can fix that. We can do structural repair work. But again, that is not an inexpensive endeavor. But again, we're not gonna, this happens to be a wet basement as well. That's another problem, but this is just, this is unsafe. We can't in good conscience leave that alone, and fix other problems in the house. Next. Roof leaks. Roof leaks cause mold. Roof leaks cause rot. If an attic is leaking, or I'm sorry, if a roof is leaking into an attic, it's going to mold in the attic. In this case, it got through the drywall and started blistering. And then, in the other case, it's just got nasty black mold. This is stuff we see on a regular basis. Some folks may not realize, because if you don't see it in your home ever, it's not uncommon to come across this stuff in houses, especially LMI homes that have challenges sort of maintaining what they have. Next. Okay, electrical upgrades. So this one, this is a bit more of a complex conversation, but I'll kind of give you a brief overview. Two examples. One, a mobile home park, which actually isn't too far from our a project where I took these pictures from our Ithaca shop. This mobile home we electrified. It had an old small service that could not support full electrification, so we had to do an upgrade. And unlike a simple electrical service upgrade on a house where it's an overhead service, we upgrade the line and the panel, and it's a quick, easy one-day job. This particular one, that meter can on the left-hand side was about 500 feet away from the mobile home we were working on, just because that's how parks sort of get built. So what we had to do is we had to trench a whole new electrical service to this meter on the right, and that's sitting next to the mobile home now. But we had to cross. We would have had to cross multiple yards and driveways. In this case, we were actually able to get NYSEG to set a pole for us and run an overhead wire on their dime, which is rare. But they did not charge us or anything for it, which is nice. But when we run into a situation like that, this is not a simple electrical service upgrade. And then that also ties into the other problem is underground services. If the transformer is on a pole 300 feet away and it's an underground buried line, I have to dig that whole line up, because it's usually not in a conduit that I can pull new wire through, to pull new electrical lines through. And again, that is a significant cost to the homeowner to be able to solve those problems. Next, please. Knob and tube wiring. So this is a lot more common than you think. I come across knob and tube all the time, and it's a lot of times in the attic, because it may be removed for the entire from the entire house in the past, but they don't touch the stuff in the attic because they figure, oh, it's in the attic, it's not bothering anybody. This is actually a fire hazard to bury knob and tube wiring in an insulation like this. That is a big no-no. Forget about the fact you've got exposed wires in junction boxes. Knob and tube wiring, there's a reason we don't use it anymore. And to pull out knob and tube wiring, I mean, that could take an electrician a day, or a full day of work or more, depending on how extensive it is to terminate all those lines and basically rewire the house. And again, NYSERDA does give us some funding to make some minor modifications, but if we're talking about whole house systems, there's just no money in the budget for Empower for that. Next, please. Underbellies. Halco does more mobile home work than probably any other contractor in the network, probably any other contractor in the state, or I dare say we're probably nationwide leading. We've pioneered a lot of mobile home insulation upgrades that we've done over the years. But if we've got an underbelly of a mobile home that's just all tore to shreds, that's just leaking heat like crazy, because that's where all your ductwork is. That's where all your plumbing is. So frozen pipes, lost heat, wasted energy. A belly of a mobile home, sometimes it can be a simple square where we can cut it out, clean it up, fix it, and then properly insulate and seal up that belly properly. But a lot of the times what we run into is I've seen underbellies of 60-foot by 14-foot mobile homes that are completely destroyed. The entire underbelly has been destroyed by feral cats and animals and whatnot. And the only way to fix it is to basically rebuild that belly, and that is an endeavor to fix that all up so we can insulate it properly. And again, goes right back to cost and money. Next, please. Undersized ductwork. So so we're shifting now. If we can make the house electrify ready and heat pump ready with the insulation, fantastic. But now we run into situations where if we've got an old gas or oil or propane furnace in the basement, it could have really small ductwork, but that could be fine for the furnace. Heat pumps need 2 or 3 times more airflow than a traditional fossil fuel furnace. So we don't have enough airflow and we don't have enough ductwork. We have to, in some cases, rebuild that entire duct system. And that, again, that is an involved process too. We do our best with what we can, but we run into this all the time. And that just adds more funding or more cost to an otherwise already somewhat costly heat pump project. Next. Again, complex heating systems. Again, in this case, this was a boiler system. We can't use a boiler with an air source heat pump effectively. So we put in mini splits. So we weren't able to reuse any of the distribution. And again, that adds cost. When you can't use the existing distribution like ductwork, rarely do we get in a situation where it's a simple swap out. But if we can't use the existing distribution, we have to basically build an entirely new heating system, and that's again adds more cost. Next. Oil tank removal. So just like the asbestos, just like the vermiculite, removing an oil tank from a house is not inexpensive either. So legally, to remove an oil tank, because it's considered a hazardous material container, it needs to be certified, cleaned, and removed by a certified, licensed, insured contractor. So dealing with these oil tanks, especially with some of the grant incentives that are available through NYSERDA, requires removal of the oil tank. And the only way to do that is either the homeowner handles it themselves, which we don't really recommend because it can create another kerfuffle down the road if the thing busts and starts leaking. Or God forbid it's full of oil. Then we got to figure out how to get rid of the oil. So we do work with some contractors that deal with this stuff on a regular basis. It's what they do. But again, it's another challenge, another cost that, there's no program available is going to give us, a few $1,000s to get rid of an oil tank. We can get rid of the equipment, but the tanks, that's a challenge. And in case anybody's wondering, a propane tank can be reclaimed by the propane supplier without too much of an issue. But oil companies don't typically take the old oil out of the tanks because it's considered contaminated. They can't just sell that to the next person. Next. Plumbing repairs. So this kind of highlights some old plumbing issues that were common in older mobile homes, old materials that have since been recalled and are deemed inadequate. But we can't insulate a house or underneath a mobile home without making sure there's no pipe leaks, there's no drips, there's no busted pipes. But again, this is more repair work. Again, if we run into a situation where we have a problem in front of us, we can't get around it, we can't finish our work until we solve this problem. It's just another hurdle and another problem we have to solve. Next. Okay, that was it for me. Thanks for everybody's time here. I am very happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'll stick around to the end. And if you do have any questions, let me know. Thank you. Back to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Matt. Those pictures gave me the heebie-jeebies. So it's really fascinating to see all these things people are contending with in their homes that prevent them from moving forward with the energy upgrades that would save them money and make their homes healthier, safer, and more comfortable.
I wish I could send you the mold smells through the computer.
Oh God, no.
Then you'd really have the heebie-jeebies.
Please don't. I'm glad it's not scratching. So, because there is such a need for a funding stream like this gap fund legislation that we're trying to pass, and by the way, all of the clean energy hubs, when they did their assessments of needs and barriers regionally, they came across this same problem as a key thing that needs to be overcome in order for them to be able to help folks all across New York to make energy upgrades. So, in various regions of the state, there are organizations doing incredible work where they're getting funding in place to do sort of regional type of gap funds. On a smaller scale than what we hope to be able to do statewide. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our next speaker, Jasmine Graham, who is the executive director of the Mid Hudson Energy Transition Project. And what Jasmine will explain to you what they do in the Hudson Valley and the incredible work and the people that they can reach and through the program that they're running there. So welcome, Jasmine, and very happy to have you on the call. I should also say that in the what was it felt like 5 years that we worked on envisioning this gap fund and trying to put together how this legislation would work. Jasmine was a key co-creator of this idea and putting this in place. And Jasmine also came up with the name for the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification or GAP Fund. So Jasmine has the GAP Fund in her DNA. Okay, I'll shut up now and turn it over to Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That is definitely something that I'm proud of, and I bring it up all the time. I'm like, when I named the Gap Fund, but I'm really, really excited to speak with you all today. As Lisa said, I'm Jasmine Graham. I'm the ED of an organization called Mid Hudson Energy Transition, and I'm really excited to talk with you all today about what we're working on. So, next slide, please. So here in the Mid-Hudson Valley, we are headquartered in Kingston, and we empower communities to own and share renewable energy, create healthier buildings, and join in community wealth building. And what I'm going to talk about today is kind of how we marry all three of those things. But first and foremost, we went out and we listened to our local community to find out what they needed. Next slide, please. And these are the problems that we heard. Ultimately, building decarbonization is completely inaccessible to everyday people, especially low-income folks. What we heard from people is, I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise, and I don't have the money. And we said, okay, all right, what can we do about that? So we started to realize that we had technical knowledge, we had the ability to project manage these projects, and we thought, we really do believe that there are some financing options that we can leverage. And so next slide, please. We started off with the creation of our Home Upgrade Grants program, or our HUG program, where, if you can't tell, I like acronyms, where we provide free wraparound technical assistance to low-income folks in Kingston, starting first and foremost with homeowners. And we project manage the entire thing from applying to incentives, having them complete the free home assessment through the Empower Plus program. We help them design a scope of work with the contractors. We help stack all available grants, and we walk them through project construction. Next slide, please. And this has been a really successful program so far. What we look to do is focus on pre-electrification. So we focus on the health and safety issues that prevent people from accessing energy efficiency and ultimately electrification. And I pulled up our post survey and grabbed a few quotes straight from our participants. First one is M had stepped up with a home upgrade grant when it became evident that we had fallen through the cracks of state-funded programs and vastly changed our lives. Everyone involved was kind, thorough, knowledgeable, and professional. We heard it's no longer freezing in my house, and this might seem too good to be true, but it actually makes a huge difference in your home at no cost to you. We've heard numerous times that people felt like they had no other way and no other option. This one quote, I will say, when I read it the first time, really made me tear up. And it says, keep on going with these projects, please. As seniors on a fixed income, the upgrades we were granted through this program will be life-changing, both financially and regards to our physical health. Our big old house is so much warmer and drier this winter, and our heating bills so much lower. This means we won't have to worry as much about how to pay for heat, and we'll be warm and cozy this winter. Our electric bills are less too. And this is what we're seeing when we're giving out what are pretty marginal grants. We give out between $5,000 and $20,000 to folks here. And we have seen all of the cases that were mentioned. So next slide, please. I would like to echo everything that Matt said. We have one case right now that requires a $55,000 roof repair. This is actually a photo from part of the roof where they have 2x4s that they put up themselves to hold some of these planks up. This is a longtime senior citizen, fixed income, low income homeowner right in Kingston, New York. And there's mold and moisture issues that are prominent. In one case, we actually had someone who came to us after getting insulation work through the weatherization assistance program and having increased mold and moisture in their basement as a result because they didn't first look at the health and safety issues. We went down and we looked at that basement, and we also found, no shock, asbestos in a friable state on the pipes. And so, this is what right now we have one quote around $10,000 to remediate this asbestos before we can try to fix anything else up in that basement. We have numerous feedback from our participants that they really would like windows and doors to be covered in this program. That is not something that is currently easy to fund in any way, shape, or form. They're very expensive. And in Kingston, where we're located, it was New York State's first capital. More than half of the building stock was built before 1939. And a lot of these places have original or 50-plus-year-old windows that are just drafty and leaking air at a really high rate. And then we also have cases of lead contamination. And so we said, we have these, we're project managing the whole thing for free. We're bringing in our own contractors. We have our own technical experts, and we're giving people up to $20,000 in grant funding. But still, somehow that is not enough. And so here's a case from one of our homeowners. This is someone who does need about a $50,000 roof repair. You can see the moisture. This is on the second, this photo on the bottom here is on the second floor of their home. And that is moisture that has been coming down from this dilapidated roof that they've been dealing with for many, many years with kind of no hope or help in sight. In this particular case, we've already earmarked a $20,000 grant for their roof. However, there's another about $33,000 in gap funding needed for the remaining roof repair, as well as the mold and moisture needed. And if we can have that gap funding, then we can unlock up to $30,000 in state and federal incentives, particularly for the electric panel wiring, the upgrades that are needed, the heat pumps that are needed, and the energy efficiency and weatherization work. This person is a tier 1 Empower Plus customer, which means that their project can be fully funded by NYSERDA as long as it meets certain cost effectiveness tests. But even with that, and even with the fact that you can reapply to Empower Plus, so they can get like 2 rounds of $10,000 of funding, there's still this $33,000 gap. And that is, not uncommon as we're hearing across the board. Next slide, please. And so ultimately we said, well, in the absence of state action, we need some sort of fund to fill this gap ourselves. And we created the HELP Fund. It's a green community investment fund, and it empowers everyday people like everyone here on this call to actually invest in our fund, provide capital that we can then lend out at ultra low rates to fill this gap and have inclusive, accessible financing for folks. Next slide, please. And so the way that we've structured it is that investments start at just $100. Community investors, so everyday people in New York, can get a 4% return over a 2-year term. Those community investors actually have board decision-making power. We've integrated energy democracy in here so that folks actually have say over how this fund works. And these community investors are always paid back first. We also accept investments from impact investors, from philanthropy. We have different note options with different terms, but all of this money is used for these accessible loans. Next slide, please. And so our loans are ultra low interest, 2% interest financing, and we're able to do that through a philanthropic interest rate buy down. And this money can be used to make the health and safety improvements, the energy efficiency improvements, the structural upgrades that are needed, deferred maintenance, panel upgrades, smart thermostats, heat pumps, geothermal, solar, battery storage. You can stack what you need and you can get access to this extremely low interest financing with no credit minimums, no lien on your home, no collateral or guarantees. And we are able to do that through a loan loss reserve partnership with NYSERDA, so that if folks do default on their loans, we have some guarantees in place on that side of things. But for us, this is really about trust-based, relationship-based financing where you are helping folks that have no other options. And that's the same thing that the GAP Fund is looking to do. These are folks that have exhausted every other opportunity, every other state program, and they have these key barriers that are just unfundable. So while our fund is here in Kingston, New York, all of these cases are not unique. They're happening all across the state, all across the country, and the need for the GAP Fund is massive. Next slide, please. And what we've seen is by taking this approach where we are project managing, we are partnering with trusted contractors, we are providing our own grant funding, it's really having a multiplier effect. You're finding that not only are people reducing their on-site emissions, having more energy efficiency in their home, but they're having positive health outcomes. They're having less respiratory issues, less medical bills that they have to pay. And the lower energy bills increase property rate value, increase credit scores, and that's more so on the lending program side, and ultimately housing justice. For us, it's about preventing displacement, keeping people in their homes that want to be in their homes, and making sure that they can live a healthy, safe life, and have all of their basic needs met. So we are helping the Hudson Valley to fill the gap, but it is just the start and we need so much more. So we are very proud supporters of the GAP Fund, and I really encourage everyone to both check out our website, check out the Invest in Help website to see if you'd like to make an investment in our fund so that we can continue to demonstrate success and what it means to actually show up for our low-income neighbors and make sure that they're not left behind in this transition. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, and thanks to all our presenters. We are just coming to the end of the presentations, and then we will have time for some Q&A for those who can stay on past 1 o'clock. Can I wanted to highlight that a lot of people wondering what kind of programs are available in your area. And the best way to find out what's available to you is to contact your local clean energy hub. And Lindsay put a link to that in the comments. And those are your local neighborhood helpers who are supposed to know about all of the clean energy resources for your particular area. They can answer questions like what is the income cutoff that would make you eligible, because that depends on your location and your household size. So reach out to your hub. They are a resource for you. They are funded by your dollars and they want to help you. Can we go to the next slide? We're going to finish up here with a little take action. I'm going to turn this over to Annie Carforo, who got home late last night after testifying at the energy hearing. And Annie is from We Act for Social Justice. I can't remember the name of the organization because I'm on Zoom. Okay, Annie's from We Act, and she's going to tell you how we're going to advocate with our legislators to win the GAP fund in this year's budget. Take it away, Annie.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for your interest in this really important campaign. And thank you to all our speakers. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do right now. So a very, very quick briefing of like where we are in the legislative session. Our state legislators are back in office. They are working right now on a budget that they're going to come into a three-way compromise between our state Senate, our state assembly, and the governor's office. by April. So we have a really small but robust timeline to get as much kind of advocacy in place as possible, so that we are both informing our legislators about the importance of this bill, and really pushing them to take action to put it into the final budget. So we have a couple of things that we need your help on, because the way that this is going to pass is if we can show our legislators that there's widespread support and need for this bill. So the first thing is, we've made this really easy for you. We actually encourage you to do it right now. But write to your legislator and tell them that you support the GAP fund. So you can use the link that was just dropped in the chat by Lisa. And it's kind of filled out for you already. If you want to add in your own messaging, I think that you're able to do that. If you have a story that you want to share, if you or your neighbor or a family member has dealt with some of the issues that we were talking about earlier, or maybe has had like a positive experience with the Mid-Hudson energy transition, please share that story, because data and facts are important, but when you give a personal experience, a lived experience, that goes a lot farther in a legislator's memory, and in them understanding these issues and how they impact their constituents. So fill out that email tool. Also, if you do have a story, if this really inspired you and motivated you to share more publicly, of, maybe experiences of you trying to access energy efficiency programs that then, you got derailed because of health and safety concerns, consider reaching out to one of the organizers on this, from this call. That can be Lisa, that can be Avni, Amber, me, Jasmine, and share your story with us so that we can get, more examples of how the GAP Fund is going to help everyday people. And then stay tuned, because now that you're interested, we want you to stay engaged. We're going to have a bunch of actions coming up in February. If you are part of an organization, we are looking for people to submit, organizations to submit memos of support. This is, something that you submit on your organization's letterhead that lets your legislators know, or multiple legislators know, that there is support for this bill. So we're going to be collecting memos of support. We're also planning to have a virtual lobby day. I think we're just confirming the date. But that's a great opportunity to, from the comfort of your home, without having to get on a bus and get over to Albany, meet with a bunch of different legislators to educate them about the bill. So we're going to have that all organized. You can meet with your legislator, you can meet with other legislators in your area, and really get your lobbying practice in. And remembering that our legislators do work for us. So this is an opportunity to talk to them about some of the issues that you're experiencing in your homes, and how this GAP Fund can help us both achieve healthier and safer homes, achieve our climate goals, and make sure that everybody has access to lower energy bills and clean energy. So that was kind of some of the things that you can do. If you're only going to do one thing right now, please fill out that email link. It is really, really easy to do. But definitely stay in touch with us so that you can join us for our lobby day. This is just the beginning. And I feel really hopeful and optimistic that we're going to win something amazing. So let's keep the pressure up. And I appreciate everybody.
Thank you so much, Annie. So the link to take action is in the chat. There are 80 people on this call, and only 8 people have taken action so far. So I'm going to just ask everybody to click on that link and go to the email and hit send. And Melissa, if you could unshare the slides so we can all see each other now. And then you can, type done when you've sent the email, and let's see if we can watch those take action numbers go up close to 80. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Jonathan. Adam. I feel like I'm on what was that show when we were kids? Well, so we're so happy to have you taking this action with us today. And I'm going to add this to Renewable Heat Now's link tree so you can easily text it to a friend and ask them to take action. The GAP Fund is supported by lots of different organizations and entities, and the 2 campaigns that are pushing on it the most are the Energy Democracy Alliance and the Renewable Heat Now campaign. And we're just so proud to be bringing this legislation that is long, long overdue to create this funding stream. thanks everybody for taking these actions, and text that link to a friend, send it to your mom, your neighbor, your kids, your BFF, and ask them to do it. It's a quick and easy thing. And this legislation only has a few co-sponsors in the Assembly and in the Senate. It's been a little bit of a sleeper, so we want to get a bunch of co-sponsors on there, and that will indicate to the legislative leadership that this is a priority and it needs to be funded. For context, Governor Hochul announced this year in her State of the State that she was going to put $1 billion of funding towards climate and energy solutions, clean energy solutions. But then when her budget came out, it turned out that she was only talking about 200 million a year for 5 years, which is not very much money. Um, and so we really need to put some weight behind the fact that energy solutions need funding. And let's remember that the GAP Fund is not just about climate and energy. New York has the oldest housing stock of any state in the country. And we have the largest city with the oldest houses is Buffalo of any state in the country. We have some old buildings, and that means people can't afford to heat and cool their buildings. They are often uncomfortable in their buildings, and the buildings are actually making them sick. And so this is really about quality of life, health and comfort, as well as climate and energy. It all is together. And so we have these energy programs that already have grants. We need to make sure that folks can unlock that grant money and make their lives better, lower their bills, and help with climate change. So I will get off my soapbox now, and let's field some of these questions. Feel free to keep adding your questions in the chat. And I'm going to go to Avni with the first question, which is about what happens if you are a renter and your landlord gets GAP funding and energy funding to get work done in your home. What happens to you? What provisions are there in the GAP fund that protect you in that situation?
Yeah, so there, like I mentioned, there is the cap on rent increases. So that's a cap set at 3% increases for the next 5 years. Or if there are more stringent rent increases in your local municipality, lucky you. And also that is the number that would apply. So if it's like a 2% increase cap in your municipality, that's what would apply. That's how it's written into the bill. There's also some restrictions on the sale of the unit. So for example, a housing developer that just wants to like buy, flip, and sell houses would not be able to do that with this money. So you wouldn't be able to, buy a couple of units, fix them up, and then sell them as luxury properties. You'd have to sell them to qualified low-income home buyers, so that is actually still an affordable property for people who live in that city or live in that neighborhood. Another rental protection is you'd be able to, you would be receiving what's called a tenant synopsis. And this is something that the Division of Housing and Community Renewal already do for their program. So it's kind of like tried and tested that when you actually give someone a sheet of paper explaining when the repairs are happening, what's the timeline, what they can expect, and also what their rights are, you're informing tenants that, hey, this is allowable behavior on the part of the landlord, but here's what they're not allowed to do, and here's recourse or who you can go to if the landlord is breaking these rules. So you're also informing and educating tenants about their rights.
Great, thanks, Avni. It's always a real dilemma of how to provide public money for landlords to upgrade buildings in a way that is equitable and doesn't lead to people losing their homes or gentrification. So we put a lot of thought into how we structured the GAP funding for those kinds of buildings, and it is definitely much more complicated than providing money to owner occupied buildings, for sure. Um, let's see. Peter King says, would the GAP Fund encourage local healthy homes, aka weatherization plus health initiatives? I'm not sure I understand the question, Peter. Does somebody understand what Peter's asking?
I could describe it briefly.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just that the program that Jasmine just described is basically, I may be wrong, but it's in many ways a healthy homes program. And would the GAP fund, GAP fund is very much going in that direction, it seems. Would it be able to encourage local funding efforts like that, where you're braiding a lot of funding streams
Uh,
together?
yeah, I understand the question better. Thank you. Jasmine,
I
you got?
Yeah, I would say definitely. What we're finding is the health and safety barriers are really the greatest barriers at this point, and the cost of them, they are extremely costly to do, be it these asbestos, lead remediations, roof repairs, and ultimately having funding for any of this improves the health and safety of the home. So I would say that it definitely encourages a healthy home approach, but also like an efficiency first approach. For us and all of the programs that we're doing, we're really just getting people to the point where they could even consider a heat pump. The chasm between have and have not, and folks that are prepared for electrification and folks that are not is huge. Like the barriers are so numerous. And so I do think that the gap fund is really critical in making sure that we reduce the barriers that allow people to take this efficiency first um, um, approach.
Thank you. That answers. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We've had a couple of questions. We waited a long time for the federal funding from the IRA to come to New York to help with some of these energy upgrade issues. And some folks are wondering, with the new administration, what about those monies? Are they still going to be available to New Yorkers? And how does that sort of relate to the value stack that we are trying to put together to make these projects work out for folks? Anybody want to take that?
I'll just say that this is a time of a lot of uncertainty. Um, I don't have some magic words that I can say to make any of us feel better about the moment that we're in, but what I can say is what we've been able to do on a local level has been really powerful. And it has really shown us that together we can make the impact that we want to make. Our gap fund is our version of the gap fund is small, it's hyper local, but you can do it too. I want us to um, harness as much hope as we can, and also our collective power, because that is the only thing that is going to help us achieve our goals here. The truth is, we don't know where federal funding is going to go, what is going to look like, how much there will be. And so the need for state, local utility funding and all of these alternatives is actually much higher now. So I would say the gap fund passing this year is more crucial than ever, because we don't know the state of federal funding.
That is true. And for those of us who've worked on the local level, we know how powerful that grassroots work can be. And it's very empowering to sort of get this stuff done without relying on, we do want the federal and the state programs to be fully funded and to work, but we shouldn't despair. We should keep that local work going. And a lot of people are excited about doing work at the local level. Okay, where are we on questions? Everyone typed done and then I lost the questions.
I saw a question earlier about situations of hoarding, and I would love to just speak to it for a second because we've definitely had that happen a few times in our program. We've had folks that have just a lot of things in their home, and I'm guilty of it too. And you will have a contractor go into the home and say, this is a hoarding situation. We can't do work in here, and unless the things are moved. And so we actually have given out a grant for just moving things, just putting things into storage and getting them out of the contractor's way, because in many cases, folks are not able-bodied to make those changes themselves. They physically can't do it, and so they might have no health and safety barriers. In one of the cases that I'm thinking of, they didn't have mold, they didn't have asbestos, they didn't need a roof repair. They were totally ready for energy efficiency, but they had had surgery and they physically couldn't move the amount of stuff that needed to move. So in that case, we provided one of our home upgrade grants, and a portion of that money did go to moving the stuff in their home. So I did see someone mention it, and I also saw someone remark that it's very common. So I would say, the barriers are plentiful. And I think the building flexibility into the GAP fund, which I know that my colleagues have worked really hard to do, allows us to kind of address the many issues that we've seen arise.
Thank you, Jasmine. I personally spent an entire Saturday with another friend moving things out of someone's attic who is a hoarder and climbing the ladder, bringing them down the ladder, and then weaving our way through the stacks of things downstairs to take them to outside so they could get the attic weatherized. So been there, done that. Yes, there's all kinds of barriers that people face, including some of their mental health barriers, etc. So that is definitely real. And again, really speaks to the local level. You can't overcome all of the barriers from some kind of program that's designed in a nice, tidy office somewhere far away. So these local programs are always going to be important with where you have relationships with people in communities, and that really helps. But if the programs can be designed so that organizations like Jasmine's can braid together the various resources and project manage, that's really the recipe for success. Dick Cornbluth asked a few times about radon, which is something we haven't really talked about a lot. And this is especially important because, radon can come into your house through the basement. And if your house isn't weatherized and sealed, then it's less likely to build up and become a health hazard. So radon is a case where actually by tightening up your house, it's one area where you could actually increase the health hazard. And I don't know, would you like to talk about radon at all, Matt? And then maybe somebody else wants to see if we want to.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a possibility. Old homes that are super drafty and leaky don't typically have radon problems because it doesn't allow it to build. Tight homes, so there's a spectrum. So if your house is here and you make things better, you can create other problems, and then vice versa. If the house is too tight, you have different problems. So it can be a challenge, but yeah, I mean, radon is definitely an issue. We do radon testing as well, and radon mitigation. So that is something that we deal with on a regular basis. But it's another challenge, and sometimes it's a crapshoot. Some houses don't have radon problems, but their neighbors do. It's just a matter of where the radon gas can leak into the house. But yeah, it's definitely. I guess I could have put that on my slides too. But yeah, that is another issue. I can't think of everything.
No, I think we haven't really talked about radon much in conjunction with these programs because it doesn't tend to be something we identify that prevents people from moving forward with insulation and air sealing and electrification, but it is a problem that can occur when you do seal up your house. So conversely, and it is important as we're thinking about a holistic whole home approach. We have to include thinking about how we would test for and address and mitigate any radon problems. Dick clearly has not had the last word on this, so go ahead, Dick.
Just to establish my creds. I was a nationally certified radon mitigator for 25 years. So, so Matt is right and you're right, mostly, although one of the driving forces for radon entry is stack effect. So negative pressure in the basement because of air moving up through the building can increase radon levels. So sometimes if you tighten the house up, you can lower the negative pressure in the basement because you've reduced the actual flow of air from the lower to the upper. So it has not been easy to definitively establish a correlation between building tightness and radon. It's complicated. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
And so, but the issue is what, you know, radon is a serious health hazard at certain levels. And what would trigger a test? And, you know, weatherization was told not to fix radon. They were told don't touch it. And NYSERDA and programs in NYSERDA do not deal with radon. So what would even trigger testing for radon in these programs?
Yep. Thanks, Dick. Dick is a building scientist with many years of experience and always teaches me something every time we have an opportunity to meet. You know, when we talk about weatherization, and a lot of people don't know what all that entails. Usually, people's first thought is about their windows, but really, it's the first thing to think about is your attic and your basement, and the so-called stack effect is what happens when you have sort of a flow of warm air that rises up and goes out of your attic. It actually sucks cold air in through the basement. And so it could actually bring that radon from your basement up into your living space as it's moving air through your house. So when you do a good weatherization job, you really minimize that stack effect that can happen in a home, which can make a whole home colder and more drafty, and also can move contaminants from your basement into your conditioned space or your living space. Okay, let's see if does somebody want to address this question about the green bank. There's always a question when there's a funding gap. Why isn't the green bank filling that funding gap? It's a great question. Sometimes we really do wonder what it is the green bank is actually funding, but and how is that helping us? But in the case of this type of gap funding, I see you dropped a comment in the chat, Jasmine. Maybe you want to take that one again too, or
Yeah, the New York Green Bank typically only funds very large projects. So you're looking at like $5 million plus projects. A few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, they released the Community Decarbonization Fund, which was meant to be their first form of concessionary funding. They were going to lend to CDFIs at a 1.5% interest rate. And those CDFIs could then, on the back end, lend out at concessionary rates to low income folks. The problem with this program, and we did pursue this program a lot. We really tried to make it work for us. A few problems. One, you have to partner with a CDFI. Our banking partner is Ulster Savings Bank, and they're doing all of our loan servicing. They are not a CDFI, they're a community mutual bank. And so they were ineligible. But the thing is that Ulster Savings Bank was willing to have a very concessionary rate. We were looking at around 2-3%. Um, most of the companies that have been approved through the Green Bank's Community Decarbonization Fund, or CDF, are upcharging 5%, 6%, and they're really looking at large multifamily buildings that they can still give these very large loans out to. And the reason is because that CDF money has to be deployed in 2 years. And so if you take a house by house approach, like we're doing, single family, 1 to 4 unit, then oftentimes they're not going to be able to actually lend out the full 2, 5, or 10 million that they are being given by the Green Bank. In addition to that, there's usually exclusionary underwriting criteria, including credit checks, liens on your home, disqualification if you've had a bankruptcy. And so we find that it really actually, inhibits the people who really need it. And this ends up being another type of commercial loan for large scale multifamily affordable housing, which of course needs lending products, but the GAP fund is really different. This is grant funding. This is a worst case scenario, last resort. You know, this is how we help the people that need the most help. And we don't punish them with 30 years of unreasonable debt in order to, you know, have a healthy home and electrify. So we really have tried, and I will say, you know, I've had good experiences with the Green Bank, but their programs are certainly not accessible to low-income folks, communities of color, disabled folks, anyone, you know, needing language justice. Like, we have bilingual community coordinators that help people to navigate these programs. And so there's just a lot of barriers to making that a realistic means of funding for the level of need that we have in the state.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. I wanted to address Lauren's comment in the chat about choosing a title for your email. And unfortunately, that is set up that way because some of the forms that comments go to, like if you're sending it to Governor Hochul's office, require you to choose a title, and we can't submit the letter without choosing a title. And the title choices are reflect what is on those government forms. But for this, I might be able to go and change it and take those titles off there. There are no gender neutral titles. So I just wanted to flag that we are aware of the problem, and it's been a problem with trying to make for the action engine that we use has to sync up with the forms where they might submit your letter to. And so, yes, it bothers us as well. And I apologize for that. All right. Well, I wanted to let you guys know that we're up to 124 emails sent. So still a ways to go because that's 2 per person. So that's half of the, you know, that number has commented. Please comment. And if you are a member of an organization that would be willing to write a memo of support for the GAP Fund, we are going to be collecting those. Avni, I think, is putting her email address in the chat so you could connect with her. We'll also be sending a follow-up for this webinar to all of you with the link to the recording and all the links that were shared, all the pertinent links that were shared, and we'll make sure you know who to contact about a memo of support. We'll be following up with information about opportunities to do virtual lobbying for this bill, and an easy way to share the link out so that we get lots more emails going to legislators asking them to co-sponsor and support this legislation. We're hoping that Assemblymember Kellis will be putting out a Dear Colleague letter asking for colleagues to sign on to the GAP Fund to support it in the budget. And then when she does, that should be in the next few days. We'll need your help in getting that letter in front of your legislator and asking them to sign. So lots of work to do in this busy budget season in Albany. We have to pass our legislation that's going to move our climate forward. We have to fund this GAP fund. We have to save horseshoe crabs. There's just so much to do. So thank you all so much for being here today with us. Thanks to our wonderful panel of presenters, to Assemblymember Kellis and Senator Gonzalez for being such great champions, and to all of you for your wonderful questions and your activism and advocacy. And look for a follow-up email with the links, etc., in the coming days. Hopefully, we hope to get that out soon. Thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.